Book 7 is one of my favorite parts of the Overlord series, and the reason for this is that it addresses a problem most fantasy worlds should have: powerful ex-adventurers. I mean, think about it. If just 1% of all adventurer guild members will eventually turn rogue, that usually means that hundreds if not thousands of superhuman outlaws are roaming the land without any strings attached to them. This will inevitably have an effect on society, one way or another. And Overlord neatly illustrates this ex-adventurer underground, with all of its problems and its opportunities. But why would anybody turn their back on the good adventurer guild and become a rogue? A worker that is willing to accept the most dirty of jobs if the amount of gold paid hits the right level, usually the ceiling. As explained in my previous videos, the Adventurer Guild in Overlord has a rather complex history. It was founded in the aftermath of a demonic war, had to separate itself from any state authority and declare itself strictly neutral in regards to any interhuman conflict in order to become a transnational institution that can combat threats to humanity across borders. And as a result of this, the guild tends to enforce its rather strict regulations in order to keep their neutrality and the adventurers alive. So if you violate guild rule often enough, you will eventually lose your license plate. Like literally. And by probability alone, there will always be a certain percentage of adventurers who become greedy, unruly, criminal, or simply disillusioned with the Adventurer Guild. I mean, it's only natural that among the thousands of fireball-flinging, sword-swinging anti-monster mercenaries, some adventurers might have a problem with any form of rules, regulation, and general behavior guidelines. For example, Papatra Orgrion, the leader of Greenleaf, was kicked out of the guild for showing the guild master an offensive hand gesture, which just happened to be a fist in his face. So after physically assaulting his boss, Papatra was kicked out. But that little conflict doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad guy. Quite the contrary. He cared for his team and was in turn held in high regards by them. And we are talking about the respect of rather dubious dudes. So he's definitively a good leader, going so far as to turn down opportunities and fortune out of safety concerns. Understanding that the worker's entire business model depends on high risk, high reward, dirty work, his attitude is rather outstanding. And as the saying goes, fear an old man in a profession where people die young. Hi. Especially if he has better equipment than most adamantite ranked adventurers. The complete opposition of an old, cautious leader who treats his teammates well would be the leader of Tenmu, Iria Usruf, a ruthless battle maniac and self-obsessed slaver. Given his personality and his deep belief in the supremacy of the human race, it is widely believed that this gentleman once called the theocracy his home. But if this is true, he had likely forsaken his birthplace and his middle name after going full-on rogue. With his ego being as big as it is fairly safe to assume that he didn't adhere to the God-given rules of the theocracy or the strict guidelines of the Adventurer Guild. Taking and mistreating 3 elven slaves for and by himself, he is ruled by primal instincts and carnal pleasures, unable to hide his twisted nature and unwilling to restrain himself enough to function in a normal team. Aria is truly a self-centered battle maniac who is hungry for praise and power. He fights by himself and for himself, until beaten to death by a cute pet. But characterizing all workers as unruly, money and power-hungry fucks, thieves and slavers isn't quite right. Especially if we consider that the Adventurer Guild had put strict rules and regulation in place to prevent adventurers from actually saving people, because power politics are sometimes far more important than human lives. And therefore some dudes will turn rogue in order to save them. For example, Robert Dyke was an elite priest who joined an infamous worker group. Not because he impregnated a priestess, stole the temple's gold, or touched boys, no. He is guilty of a far more monstrous crime. He was healing the poor without paying the temple's obscene fees for this very privilege. Remember, in Overlord the temples have a monopoly on healing magic. Their control over it is absolute. Not only are they able to dictate prices to everybody, regardless if they are even associated with the temples or not, but they also can prevent anyone from giving away free healing magic by hiring assassins. So no matter who you are, you just can't sell healing spells at a low cost, or the gods forbid, heal the sick for free. And on the flip side, the temples don't enforce these strict rules out of malice or greed, but because A. educating healers is pretty expensive, B. they need the money for upkeep, personnel, locations, and so on and so forth, C. they also use this money to maintain their own independence from state authority, usually by exerting influence at court, and D. they also use this money to arm zealots that will fight against their sworn enemy, the undead. And because the temples hold sway over this vital type of magic, the Adventurer Guild, who is technically in command of an elite army, has to adhere to the rules of the temples when it comes to healing magic. If not used to heal fellow adventurers, healing magic has to be extremely expensive. But even given all of this knowledge, it is still incredibly hard to adhere to these strict rules of neutrality. I mean, just ask yourself, if you're a man of the gods, if you wholeheartedly believe healing is your true calling, it is your divine task, how many times could you walk away from a wounded man begging you to heal him, if not for his own sake, then for the sake of his wife and kids that will starve without their father working the fields? How many times are you willing to sit and watch a mother die in childbirth, knowing that you could save her and her baby with a simple hand gesture? How many times are you willing to ignore a village slowly dying of a disease you could cure before you start to heal regardless of the consequences? Another, somewhat similar source of workers is found within a certain subset of strong people who are just unwilling to be a monster hunter mercenary. They are usually in pursuit of higher goals. For example, Brian Anglaus wanted to become the strongest swordsman in order to beat his old rival, Gazev Stronov. So he wanted to grow more powerful, but he wasn't seeking to improve his guild rank in Monster Hunter. He craved battle experience against humans. And thusly he technically became a sellsword, working for Reign of Death, a mercenary company. But people like him could also become or have been workers at some point in their lives. If their goal is just to become stronger, they likely wouldn't care too much for whom they are working, as long as they gain battle experience. By the way, Arche could also be placed in this category, since he also dreamed of surpassing Gazev and be known as the strongest warrior. So please keep in mind that his status as a worker is somewhat vague, since by their very nature there isn't any form of higher authority to enforce a strict definition. So once a secondary black market for high-class ex-adventurers exists, other powerful individuals who were never even affiliated with the guild might be drawn to this occupation. In addition to all of this, there are simply a lot of those who are rich in power and short on money. Individuals who are willing to make use of the former to acquire more of the later. Arche, one of the elite scholars of Fluda Paradane himself, left the Magic Academy in order to pay off family debts. And this is the main factor. Surely there are some battle maniacs, good guys, and those who are willing to follow their higher calling. But most workers are just in it for money. So why become an adventurer if most jobs are low paying and most of the money earned is kept by the guild anyway? Why should you waste your time doing copper level quests when you're already as strong as most platinum adventurers? Why not go the morally wrong but easy way? Less work, more money, and therefore higher status. For Gringham, the leader of Heavy Measure, and most other workers in general, this sounds like a good offer. In fact, let's take a deeper look at Gringham to better understand his general mindset. He was born as the third son of a farmer in the Sorcerer Kingdom, and without any formal education, social security and money, his life looked pretty bleak, especially because his older brothers denied him his small inheritance. But in spite of all of this, Gringham managed to beat the odds. And although he lost to Brian Anglaus in the Great Tourney back when he was still in the Sorcerer Kingdom, Gringham is still an impressive fighter, and as a worker, he managed to earn himself a living. And with more jobs done, his strength grew, his equipment improved, and his status among his peers became so high that despite the lack of any formal education, he still managed to become the leader of an infamous worker team, Heavy Measure. now commanding a force strong enough to take over a small town, clad head to toe in full plate armor. Gringham has truly risen above his brothers, and he's currently just one last job away from returning home and living the good life. And like him, many workers manage to become rich. Or did I trying? And one last thing. The world of Overlord is a rather grim place, and it doesn't shy away from showing it. So what do you do with your life if you're born a half-elf? Unable to fully integrate in either human or elven society? What if you are living within the borders of a nation where other humanoids are held in contempt? Do you have any incentive to follow the law if the law itself is designed to punish you simply for existing? Is there even a normal place for a person that will by default be hated by most co-workers? Is it really morally wrong for a half-elf to break the law before it breaks them? I don't think so. And Aymina didn't either. She learned to fend for herself, and eventually ended up joining Foresight, one of the Empire's more infamous worker teams. And after we talked about the origin of the workers, we have to ask ourselves what effect they have on their environment. First and foremost, a worker team is by definition an independent group. Therefore, they have to make up for all the things they now lack due to the non-existing support from their non-existing guild. They themselves have to look into each and every job offer and compare the risk to the potential reward. And they also had to make sure that it could be found in the first place. Thusly, Foresight and many other teams made the Singing Apple Inn their home base, so we can assume that some taverns and other rather shady places will be used for this very purpose. But why is anybody even willing to hire dropouts for a higher cost? Well, workers represent the middle ground between hiring an entire company of sellswords, which would clearly show one's intent and who is responsible for the mercenaries' action, and assassins, who are very stealthy but only really good for killing specific targets. For the wide array of remaining non-monster related tasks, workers are basically required. They are willing to do the most dangerous, illegal and distasteful tasks if the pay is right. Intimidation and extortion, for example. Aymina the half-elf was more than willing to turn the proposition of a debt collector against himself and brutally beat him up and take his money. I mean, she's described as even more cutthroat than she looks like, and this facial expression already warns you that it's not a question of if, but when she will kill you if you didn't shut up right now. And it was also suggested that some workers might be willing to cooperate with crime syndicates such as the Eight Fingers. So pretty much anything organized crime can do, workers might be also willing to try. Another use for them could be an assault of your rivals. If one of your worst rivals acquires a nice lawn or a particularly beautiful lamp, you could always send out some workers to burn or steal it. For a little extra, they might actually do both. And if you're a noble and you want to solidify your position in court, you could even fund an expedition into a rival country in order to have your worker teams plunder some freshly discovered ruins. Of course, some might regard this as a grave crime, but hey, what is the worst thing that could happen? So generally speaking, the reason for why worker teams exist is the same reason for why piracy existed: supply and demand. The guild will always have a few dozens dissatisfied or criminal adventurers in need of employment, and the society will usually have some dirty work that needs to be done. And while they are not affiliated with the guild anymore, this in and of itself doesn't mean that they are criminals for being kicked out. Additionally, the guild can't persecute criminals because this is still a state prerogative. So if a soon-to-be worker left the guild, there is simply nothing it can do. But on the other hand, if they are kicked out because they either killed somebody or committed some serious crimes, the guild won't have any problems alarming local authorities about this powerful problem. And this is the point where it gets interesting. Normally, state authority would be able to overwhelm and detain normal criminals rather quickly. But if the criminals in question are highly organized squads of superhuman warriors, powerful casters, and vicious thieves, I venture to guess that normal watchmen patrolling the streets will have a hard time containing the adventurer teams on his own. The Knight of the Empire have better chances due to their arms, their training and their organization, but overall most workers could escape. So generally speaking, they are in a grey area. On one hand, most of them have committed severe crimes at one point in their lives. On the other hand, workers employed by powerful nobles might even work closely with normal adventurers. If they become a serious problem though, nations like the Empire, given their great degree of control over their country, could probably crush them. But the time and resources are better spent on other things, and occasionally, workers might be of some use. After all, they fill an important role. Workers are basically adventurer teams without any of the rules and regulations the guild enforces, and like their former co-workers, these guys can be necessary as well. Just let me give you an example. If you're a local lord and some bandits are plaguing your land, raiding your villages, rob travelers, or take them hostage, you could go to the government officials and hope that they will aid you. But keep in mind that they might have gotten a juicy bribe from the bandits in order to look the other way, or at least to inform them when they should leave the area to avoid persecution. You could of course raise a small army of peasants or hire a mercenary company to attack the bandit camp on your own, but for a fraction of the cost, you could also hire a few professional workers that go into the camp, kill off some minions, take the leaders prisoner, and torture or use magic on them until they spill out why they are here and if any government officials worked with or even for them. So sometimes even a good guy can be in need of a worker team. But with all of that said, worker teams will probably become a thing of the past. With the rise of the Sorcerer Kingdom and its seemingly limitless resources, military strength, and labor force, Nazarik's equivalent of a petting zoo is exceptionally good in exerting control over its territory and its vassal states. Thanks to their total control, there's simply no grey area, no leeway when it comes to the shady worker business. Not only did the Adventurer Guild become a state-run institution, after Einzelgarn's brilliant display of obliviousness, thusly draining the supply of potential workers, if a problem arises that would usually require a worker to solve, the champion of the living citizens, Dark Hero Momon, will be made aware of it by the concerned inhabitants of Irantel long before somebody with the money necessary could hire workers to turn a problem of the state into their personal profit. And the second and also extremely convincing argument is the rather unbalanced risk-reward ratio. After all, who in their right mind would go to the heart of the Sorcerer Kingdom and try to do shady business? I mean, it's hard to argue with a Death Knight or a Soul Eater that just caught you red-handed. So like our own classic age of piracy, the age of workers will end as well. And last but not least, let's compare Overlord's complex take on adventurer outlaws to the usual stereotypes associated with bad guild members. Normal fantasy stories will usually just focus on the hero's journey and some bright, outstanding guild members, instead of the rather dubious lot that should also be attracted by the task of monster hunting and questing. So at most maybe some spare episodes in which the heroes will hunt down some criminals will be woven into the tale. Usually the good guy will beat the bad guy half to death, and after this rather tough love, they are magically good again, even after the good guys left the village. In other darker stories, an anti-hero may just kill them all and will therefore have solved the problem of rogue guild members for all eternity, despite the fact that sooner or later new ex-adventurers will appear, and despite the fact that the economic niche the ex-adventurers occupied is still there. But the third trope is by far the most common. Usually somebody has stolen something in order to sell it for money, which he then uses to buy medicine for a sick relative, usually his sister. At some point the heroes will find out about this and offer to pay the money up front if the thief in question is willing to join his party. Naturally, the sister also gets better and becomes the spellcaster / love interest of the group. These archetypes are gliding on the very surface, of what should be an incredible complex topic. And in the end, all of the bad guys are dead or became good guys instead. In stark contrast to this oversimplified approach, Overlord practically committed an entire book to flesh out the darker aspects of these guild dropouts. And I adore Overlord for it. And now let's take a look at the fate of one of the workers, and what it might mean for the end of Overlord. Arche, by all accounts, is a tragic hero. She had grown up rich and sheltered, in her more or less loving but completely out of touch noble house. Her family's influence and wealth meant that she could go after her passion, the thing she literally had a talent for: studying magic. And as an apt pupil, she managed to become proficient in the casting of third-tier magic at a relatively young age, which is quite the achievement if we consider that Nabe's claim to third-tier lightning magic made some jaws drop in the Adventurer Guild back in the second book. But while Arche studied and her parents spent other people's money, Jerkniv took office. And while her parents weren't exactly bright and dangerous enough to warrant an immediate execution, Jerkniv instead stripped them of their title as nobility. Now bereft of all land and previous income, Arche couldn't afford it anymore to study, because she now needed to earn money in order to support her family and her beloved little sisters. And therefore she sacrificed an incredible bright future. Had she kept studying by the time the Empire became a vassal state, and flew the Paradine, the pupil of the Sorcerer King himself, Arche might have been able to seize his position, if not as a court magician, then at the very least as the elite student that could judge other people's magical abilities, since she had the same talent as Fluder. A talent Ainz potentially might have paid a handsome amount of money for, or even granted her an exalted position within his new-founded adventurer guild. Somebody who could judge magic potential surely would have had many uses. But since she needed to make money in order to pay her family's debt, she dressed in her magical girl outfit and went to a part of the city where young girls with the necessary talents could sell themselves for money. In the Singing Apple Inn, a tavern used by many workers as a makeshift base, she met the worker group of Foresight, that most unfitting of names for what was yet to come. And together with them she went out on dangerous missions, facing death and just barely overcoming it numerous times. And even though she made it that far and earned quite the handsome sum of money, she never upgraded her gear, or bought more items than she needed, simply because she gave most of her hard-earned money to her family. But a lifetime spent in absolute luxury and affluence never taught Arche's parents where the money comes from, or that you can't just spend it all on a single silly lamp while your butler lacks the necessary money to buy food. And here's where Arche's second sad fate started. She realized far too late that her parents, especially her father, was not simply hit with a couple of problems. He was the problem. Blinded and occupied with his former statues, and focused on Jerkniv, his sworn enemy that didn't even realize Arche's parents still existed, he completely neglected his family. And so after numerous times where her parents recklessly spent the money, their oldest daughter literally risked her life on numerous occasions for, she made the resolve to take her little sisters out of the house and start a new life. And all she needed to do is to earn enough money by doing one last job. A death flag so huge and vibrant, she might as well have carried Mormon's personal flag. Long story short, they go in and never made it out alive. Despite Arche knowing how risky it was, she still resolved to explore the Great Tomb. Furthermore, at least part of the reason why Arche's death caused such an uproar in the Overlord fan community is how completely avoidable her end truly was. We, the audience, know that she isn't a bad person. On the contrary, she deeply cares for her sisters. They are her family, and she has to protect them at all costs, even if she has to risk her own life on a dangerous endeavor. To her, invading the tomb and even battling in air quotes Shaltir was acceptable, because she does it for the people she cares the most. And it made it all even more sad and tragic that her two sisters were afterwards sold into slavery by her neglectful, decadent parents. But none of that mattered. In Ainz's mind, she was just a grave robber that dishonored the Great Tomb with her mere presence. And at the end of the Invaders of the Great Tomb arc, it absolutely needs to be highlighted how close Arche, both in character and action, is to Einsulgaun himself, because the part that honestly caused the most problems is, at least in my opinion, not the fact that a likable, well-intended, carrying anime girl was killed, and how completely avoidable all of this was, but how close this hits to home. We know that Einsulgaun isn't a bad person. He deeply cares for the NPCs of the Grey Tomb. They are his friends' children, and he has to protect them at all cost, even if he has to risk his own life on a dangerous endeavor against an unknown enemy. To him, battling Shalti and risking to be attacked by a hostile alliance of players, or indeed an entire guild, was worth it, because he did it for the people he cares the most. And yet this very action might bring upon his own death, and might start a civil war inside the Great Tomb of Nazarick, which would make his action all the more sad and tragic. Because Albedo has a very own perspective on the whole friendship Nakama return of the other guild members thing. The reason why the succubus was less than pleased about Ain's obsession with the guild, to the point where he risked his unlife to save a, from her perspective, traitorous NPC, is because she didn't have the attachment to the other NPCs and the guild. On the contrary, she dislikes them for abandoning them, and she values Momon over the rest and thus clearly understands the risk Momon's passion brings to his own life. Just as Arche got herself killed by fighting for her little sisters, Ainz might get himself captured or killed, or indeed eradicated, by for example fighting Shalti on his own, playing bait during the Lizardman War arc, and the Splatfest. And with the Theocracy and the Elf Kingdom being the focus of the next volume, Albedo might finally be driven to act. If Aura or Mara are captured, or more likely if the communication is lost even for a brief period of time with the Twin Floor Guardians while the Elf Kingdom and the Theocracy fight, Ainz might try something risky to rescue them, which would also make the Arche arc great foreshadowing, and Albedo, presented with yet another risk to Momon, might finally act. And with this rather worrisome thought I put in your heads, I will end this video. But before we come to the usual Patreon readout, I want to say that A. Yes, this video about the lamp inspired me to draw the connection between Arche and a possible end for Overlord, and B. I will also upload another video, this time about how rich the Great Tomb of Nazarick really is, and if it could potentially just buy the world instead of conquering it. So if you're interested in that and many more finance-related videos, with a focus on anime and game universes, I would greatly appreciate it if you give my second channel a try. And now finally, with everything said, I also want to read your opinions on Arche's death, on the similarities between her and Ainz, and if you believe that Einsulgaun might end in a similar manner, or if he perhaps learns from Arche's fate, like he learned a thing or two from Clementine. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Adam J, Al Capone, Andy, Angel of Death, Bad Guy Yee, Boyzilla, Chrissy, Diabetic Centaur, Dystopia, Elika Bird-Schlief, Thales Catus, Feral Shivon, Gigafight, Ghost of Epicness, Hector Moreno, Hoss, Yellowbait, Jason, Kleinator, Chromius, Larch, Lord Touch Me, Lord Ulbert Elaine Odell, Luces Ollie, Majima, Matt, Matt C, Marcos, Mr. Shoes, Mindless Wrath, Minnow 13, Myrtis, Ntheria's Potion, Primus 11, Sasuga Einsama, Sebastian, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Surge, Sparkly Unicorn, the Orc War Boss, Rak Edsmasher, Vash Hawkeye, Zoggo, Bane of the Lord, and Zonagorn. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, over and out.